Blaise Pascal was a famous French theologian, inventor, physicist, and writer, and he said these words: "Everyone without exception is searching for happiness." People are looking for happiness. I mean, you say, what do you want for your kids? Oh, all I want them to be is happy, right? I mean, it's what we often use. Now, there are certain habits that people who are unhappy have. Unhappy people have the habit that they believe that life is hard. They see themselves as victims to this life, rather than finding a way through and out on the other side. Another habit of unhappy people is that they believe that most people can't be trusted, and so they don't build new relationships. They stay only within their small circle. Another habit is that the third habit is they concentrate on what is wrong in this world rather than seeing anything that is right in it. Unhappy people turn a blind eye to what is actually right in the world instead focus on what is wrong. The fourth habit is they compare to others and they harbor jealousy towards others. Another habit is they strive to control their life. They try to micromanage their life, and so that nothing can go wrong, and if something goes wrong, it throws them off. And the sixth one is they approach the future with worry and fear. They see everything that could go wrong and rather than the things that could go right. And the final unhappy person's habit is this, their talk is filled with gossip and with complaints. So if you have those habits, guess what? You're probably an unhappy person. All right. So is there a way out? Now if you ask 100 people what do they want out of life, 75% of them will say, oh, well, I just want to be happy. And 90% of them who will say that, they will say, well, here's how we're going to get happy. We're going to have be with good people. It's about people. It's about places. It's about things. It's all about those kinds of things. And so they'll work towards their accomplishments. They'll try to work towards that, to be financially secure. Few will answer, well, I'll have fame and fortune. And regardless of the answer that we get, we soon are confronted with that reality that happiness is sort of elusive, isn't it? It sort of slips out of our hands and it comes back and it slips out again. And it's very transitory and it doesn't stay with us very well. It just sort of depends on what's going on. And we find ourselves asking a question, why am I not happy? And we ask ourselves, well, is there a pathway to happiness? Is there a way that you and I can find happiness? Well, what we try to do is we try to buy it, through pleasure, enjoyments, or we set ourselves up to avoid the storms of life and trials that will come our way. And we find out that happiness really isn't dependent upon my circumstances. Rather, it is dependent upon something else. So today we're going to look at Psalm 128. Psalm 128 talks about happiness. It talks about the blessed life, the good life. In verses 1 and 2, it'll use the word for blessed. It actually use the word asher for blessing, which basically means happy, happy. Okay? It's plural happy. Happy, happy, okay? And then there's the word barak, which is used in verses 4 and 5. And that word there means the blessings that come from God. And so those are two words. The word blessed basically does mean happy, but it's the blessings also that come from God himself. Now, so we're going to walk through this today, and we're going to look through 128, and we're going to look at it, and there are certain components to what they thought back then were the happy life. Now, as we walk through this, is that you'll say, yeah, that's sort of what I consider a happy life too. Some things that are common to human beings, some qualities. So the first component of the happiness is fulfilling work. Look at verse 2. You shall eat the fruit of your labor of your hands, and you shall be blessed, and it shall be well with you. Now, you and I work 8 to 10 hours a day, and so we want our work to be meaningful. We want it to be fulfilling. We want it, we want to work and so that we can eat, and we want to be able to eat that from which we work. I mean, it's sort of that kind of thing. Now remember, this is two things. Is that these people were slaves in Egypt for many years, 400 years. And they worked so that other people could eat. And they understood what that was like. And so now for the happy life, or the good life, would be you get to eat from the fruits of your own labor. You don't have to work for somebody else in the same that you're working for them to become wealthy like Pharaoh did. And that was sort of the idea of that, okay? Work has been something that has gotten sort of a bad rap over the last couple years here. But work is seen as a good thing. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of creation, before the fall, Adam and Eve were placed in the garden to work the garden. They were there to work it. They were there to have that opportunity to work in the Garden of Eden and take care of it. But this happened all before they sinned. And that was a blessing to have that. Now, we know that also that after the fall, what happened to work? It became more of a struggle. Thistles and thorns grew up amongst them. So the first thing is to have a fulfilling work. A happy life, happiness comes from having fulfilling work. It's one of the byproducts of a component of it. The second is flourishing relationships. Flourishing relationships. And they'll focus on two of the primary relationships, which is verse 3 is this: your thriving marriage. Your wife shall be a fruitful vine within your house. The vine is a picture of fruitfulness. It's a picture of growth. Adam and Eve, whenever they were put in the garden, they were said, God told them to bless them, be fruitful and what? Multiply, okay? So that was part of what it was given. There's a fruitfulness there. The picture here is a beautiful vine, thriving and flourishing. And the second part of it is faithfulness. A thriving marriage, a thriving marriage is faithfulness in it. It says within the house, the vine within the house speaks of faithfulness within the marriage. This is a contrast with Proverbs chapter 7, where it says about the wife who's not faithful. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the market, and at every corner she lies in wait. So that are signs of a happy marriage, a thriving marriage, fruitfulness and faithfulness. The proverb writer tells us this: he who obtains a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor with God. You'd say the same thing. She who finds a good husband has found favor with the Lord. Marriage is a blessing from God. Husbands and wives, how you live out your life has a huge impact on whether you are now happy or not. Now, the second primary relationship he talks about is thriving with your children, thriving children. To have children that thrive and do well. Look at this. Your children, verse 3, your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Now, the idea of the olive shoots, where you picture these olive trees, the olive trees had little shoots that would come out. And for an olive tree to do well, what happened is it started off as a shoot, and it would take about 15 years for it to grow and to mature where it would start producing fruit of its own. It was interesting, right? It takes about 15 years, maybe 18 years, maybe 38 years, to get launch, fly, kids, fly. And the olive tree is that picture of fruitfulness, of growth, that they're able to sustain on their own, to grow into independence. Now, flourishing relationships aren't limited to family. It's a primary place, but it also includes friends, right? Or maybe parents, or maybe cousins. Some of you have great cousins around here, nieces and nephews, and that you can have these flourishing relationships. And having flourishing relationships, good relationships, is part of the good life, part of happiness, right? Part of what God has given us. The third is functional citizen. Look what it says in verse 5. The Lord bless you from Zion. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. For Jewish people, they were very proud of their nation. They were very proud of Jerusalem. Why? Because it was their place. It was where God was, but it was also where their nation was. It was a symbol of their nation. It was a place of blessing, and they wanted their nation to do well, and so they prayed for the peace of their nation. When the people of Israel were sent off to Babylon, what were they supposed to do when they were in Babylon? They were supposed to pray for the city in which they lived in. Okay, now believe me, God so loved the world. We got to remember this. God so loved the world. God doesn't just love America, right? Can I have an amen to that? He loves the world, all right? He wants all the world. But we're Americans, and he loves America too, and that's okay. Okay? And it's all right to pray for the peace of America. It's okay for us to pray for the peace also of our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, right? And what they're going through. And our brothers and sisters in Russia. And our brothers and sisters in China. And our brothers and sisters in Iran and Iraq, okay? To pray for them, okay? But it's also okay for us to be good citizens here. All right? It's okay for us to be good citizens. To be fruitful, functional citizens in our own nation. The fourth fruit of happy life is a full life. A full life. What does he talk about? He says, may you see your children's children, peace be upon Israel. To see your children's children, to see your grandchildren. Now, the reason my children survived their teenage years was because of the hope for grandchildren. Otherwise, I'm not sure how many of them might have survived or not. I'm at least thinking maybe 50%, but we're not sure. There were days, okay? Now, to see your grandchildren is to live that long. My father never got to see his grandchildren. He never got to see them, okay? Because he died young. He died young. Died 42 years old. And so one of the blessings, one of the fulfilling parts of life is living long enough to see your children's children. And the thing is that we get to pass the baton as grandparents to our children, but also to our grandchildren. You know, it takes about 3 generations in which people lose faith. I think about my great-grandparents on my dad's side. They were faithful Christians. And my grandmother and grandfather were faithful Christians. My mom and dad struggled. They struggled with their faith. Their faith wasn't very alive. It was weak. And so I think about it. Now, I've got it, so pass it on to my kids now. Will my kids pass it on to their kids? And as grandparents, I have the opportunity to pass it on to my kids' kids. But that doesn't tell us how to have a happy life. It just tells us what a happy life looks like. Looks like flourishing relationships, for fruitful work. We have a functional citizenship that blesses the nation so that the nation can bless other nations. And also is that we have a full life. But how do we get there? How do we get to happiness? And verses 1 and verses 4 tell us. And it's a strange thing that God gives us, a strange pathway to happiness. It doesn't often make as much sense. It's not about really feeling good. Look what it says in verse 1. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. And then jump down to verse 4. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. That this pathway to happiness isn't about accumulating things. It's not about getting married. It's not about being in a certain nation. It's not about how living a long life, but the pathway is through fearing the Lord and following his ways. Isn't it a strange thing? Is that if you were to ask people, how do you become happy? How many people would say, well, I'm going to go and fear the Lord with all my heart? I mean, most people aren't going to go there, right? No, I'm going to go get a good job, and I'm going to get a good education and get a good job and make lots of money so that I can buy things that I don't need to impress people I don't like. I mean, it's that kind of a thing, right? That's the pathway that we are told will get us to happiness. And yet, the psalmist writer says, fear the Lord. Fear the Lord. That's going to get me to happiness. And I'm going to find happiness through this pathway, through this gateway. Yes. Now, what is fearing the Lord? I like to put fearing the Lord as this. It's terrified attraction. It's awe. It's respect. Terrified attraction. I've used this before. Terrified attraction is whenever you're a 13-year-old boy and all of a sudden you notice girls. Because you are terrified to death of them. And you are strangely attracted to them. I am guessing that happens with 13-year-old girls too. I just ain't one. Okay? And this terrified attraction is the same as if you have a good father. You respect your father. And sometimes you fear your father. But you want to be like your father. That's terrified attraction. That's terrified attraction. So as we enter into trying to follow God and to follow His way towards the happy life, it is through fearing Him, by having a terrified attraction that leads to obedience to the Lord, to walk in His ways. Walking in His ways means living in His ways, following His ways. Now it makes sense whenever you think about the proverb writer. The proverb writer says this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? And the knowledge of Him, right? I mean, it's not, because see, what happens is when you fear the Lord, guess what? You're going to make different decisions. You're going to make different decisions that are going to be following God's way of doing life. You're going to be making a set of decisions that builds flourishing relationships with other people. Because you're going to treat other people the way you want to be treated. You're going to be honest, and you're also going to be an encourager rather than a complainer, rather than a gossip. You're going to do relationships differently where you respect and you honor one another. And that leads to flourishing relationships. It's going to do different on how you do work, because you're going to decide to do your work as to the Lord. Not for the paycheck, not for your boss, but as to the Lord. And so you're going to give your best to God because He deserves your best. You're going to be diligent in your work, and therefore you'll have fulfilling work. You're going to become a citizen that not only prays for your country, but lives in obedience and submission to the government authorities. Because why? Because God has placed them in authority. You're going to have a longer, fuller life. Why? Because you're going to steward your body better. You're going to steward your relationships better. So the pathway to the happy life is by fearing the Lord. It's going after His way. It's following His plan. And see, I know all you want to be happy. You want the happy life. You want the good life. Don't go after it as the world goes after it. Go after it in a different way, where the beginning point is fearing the Lord. Terrified attraction to the Holy One. And you have so much better a proverbial probability of having the good life, the happy life that we desire. See, Jesus tells us something sort of similar when He says this in verse 21 of chapter 14. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, it is who loves me. So how do you know you love Jesus? You're keeping His commandments. Right? But then He says, and he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. The call of obedience. And the call of obedience, the call of living life with Jesus, leads us to the abundant life in Jesus. God's blessing comes as we fear the Lord. There's another passage in John chapter 10. And this is what Jesus has to say to you and I. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Who's the thief? Satan, the devil, right? His ways. So if you go after happiness, go after fulfillment in his ways, he's going to do what to you? He's going to steal your joy. He's going to steal your happiness. He's going to kill it, and he's going to destroy you. However, Jesus says this, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Isn't that great? The happy life, he says, I've come this way. I've come this way that you might have life, an abundant life. I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. I lay down my life for my sheep. Jesus laid down his life for you so that you could have an abundant, good life. And I'll tell you, anybody who is willing to go to a cross for me, I need to fear a guy that's that brave. That's tough. I mean, I need to fear that dude. And a guy who will say to us, I'm not only going to tell you that I'm going to go to the cross for you, but 3 days later, I'm going to rise from the grave. And he pulls it off. Right? So guess what? He's a person I'm willing to fear, to have that terrified attraction to. And I hope that you will have that terrified attraction to Jesus, the one who's willing to go to the cross for you, rise again, and give you the abundant